Good morning, potato chips. It's wee Paddy from across the shuck, and you're very welcome. Good morning to you, or good afternoon, I should say. Now, I've got a lovely video for you this morning. This is one of my antique knives that I've got into the habit of buying now, and this is a really interesting knife. It looks very average. It's just a little bone knife with a nickel silver end caps on it, a shield that's pinned, and that will become interesting further on in the conversation. But it's made by a company which I had never heard of, didn't know existed. Probably a lot of you do, but I'm going to go through a little brief history because I think it's interesting. It's a company called Cattaraugus, or August, maybe August, Cattaraugus, Cattaraugus, and it's an American company, and it started at the end of the 19th century. So it was about 1886 the company actually formed. 4 years before that, a man called John Camplin and his son ran a distribution business. Now, I'm not over sure, but I take it was a distribution of maybe sports gear or whatever, but knives somehow got involved. And in 1986, they formed the Cattaraugus Cutlery Company. And it was in New York, in a place called Little Valley, New York. They got a big factory or an empty space, and they bought up an old cutlery company in, I think it was Arizona, I believe, that had gone defunct. So they bought a lot of their machinery, and they started off with quite a good stock of machinery and started making knives straight away, basically, or as straight away as you can be making knives. Where this is from, I believe this one is from the turn of the century. So it's about 1915 to 1920, I believe. It's quite hard to pin it down to a date because I've tried on the time stamp, and the time stamp basically tells me it's around the turn of the century. So they started building in 1886, but, and here comes the interesting bit, well, to me, he went into partnership with another fella who had quite an interesting name, William R. Case, and his brothers. They joined in the partnership and began a knife making company. And it was quite successful. I believe it was quite successful. And if this is the sort of standard that they made, I would say it was pretty good. But I don't think Mr. Case was involved in this, but he could have been. I've no idea. So from 1886 up until W.R. Case and Sons split, him and his sons started their own factory up in 1905, or went their own way anyway, and started what we now know as Case. The Cattaraugus company, they went on to about 1963 and then went broke and sold up. The factory went into dereliction and was finally pulled down, I think, in the 60s, in the late 60s maybe. But what an interesting thing to find on Etsy. Because I didn't know anything about it until I'd done a wee bit. You know, I don't do a whole lot of research. I enjoy finding out, usually from my subs. So whether Case, this maybe is a model, it looks like a model that could have been out in the late 1800s and going on up to, but I can't be sure. Maybe somebody else can. It is a two-blade, just a little pen knife. That's all they would have called it then. It's a pen knife. Two blades, two nice little spear point or pen blades, whichever you want to call them. Now, the strange thing about this one is, and I'm going to let you see, I've never come across this before. The small blade has a half stop, but the main blade doesn't. So, I'm sure there's a reason for that. I'm not 100% sure, but maybe somebody can tell me in the description. Now, I'm not going to get to do this. This is very badly blackened at the bottom. But this is a 4-lined time stamp, which enabled me to date it to that sort of rough date. but it could have been made long before. The bone that they used was dyed and jigged, and they called this a worm groove. You can see that they called this a worm groove bone. And they didn't vary much from this type of bone other than maybe different colours. But I think you'll agree, it's a lovely little knife. It's for 100-year-old, just over 100-year-old. The backspring's still good. There's spring in them blades. The bone is perfect. And look how well it's mated up to these little, beautiful little, I really quite like these dinky little end caps. I just think it is beautiful. And it still is, all I've done, I give it a quick clean up and I give it a quick flush through, wipe the blades down with a bit of Fritz. But I don't want to do any more. I really don't want to do any more. I'm quite happy with it. I put a little bit of an edge on it. It's not razor sharp, but it'll cut. And I put just a little bit of it. But here's the interesting thing. This little shield here, just a bar shield, is pinned, I think. I've had a look down in the back, and I think I can see a pin for this, which is something the case don't do now. But whether or not they did then, if somebody can help me, it certainly looks like, but it's very hard to tell. I don't think it's this one because I think this is in the metal at the bottom because this is the pivot. So it really genuinely looks like it's been pinned. And I just find that interesting that Case went on and then doesn't pin his shields now. Did Case do that when he first started? Maybe he did. I don't know. Again, any information, I am like a sponge. I do enjoy getting it. I'm just not very good at looking it up. But there we go. That's an interesting wee knife. I'll give you a size comparison. Here is a modern day Case Barlow. It's about the same size exactly. Just the blade's going to be a little bit bigger on this. And this is just a single blade. But as you know, they come in two blade now. But they're equal end. Or not equal end, they're jackknives now. So there's not really that much difference in the blade cutting edge at all, but it's just a much more substantial knife. So I've really enjoyed finding this, doing a wee bit of research. And I mean, please, if you've got any information, if you know any on it, if you've come across the knives, just put it down below. I really enjoy reading your comments. I've actually just started reading the comments from the last one. I'm a bit behind. But I hope you'll agree, that's a Cattaraugus Cutlery Company knife. I reckon from the just the turn of the 1900s, between 1915 to 1920, somewhere around there. I think that was come from. But it could quite easily have gone back to the 1800s, the end of the 1800s when they first started production. To me, it's that old a knife. But such great production. And you can see where W.R. Casey has an eye for detail, there's no doubt. I think they've let slip their QC is not as good. Look at, that there after 100 years, there's no rubbing on the blades even. It's just perfect. So there you go, and there's with its modern, oh, got just stabbed myself. Oh, well, sure, I'm a knife boy. So there it is beside its modern day counterpart. Great knife, really enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed finding out a wee bit of something different than just a bog standard knife. And that again is another part of my traditional journey. So I'm going to set that there because I'm going to tease you now. You know, I recently got this big Gitano. Now I'll not even get this in the frame now. I got this, look at the size of the Gitano's blade. Isn't that, that is just a huge big blade. Well, I'll just set that there. Because of the shape of the handle, I knew it was something of a Navaja Spanish sort of knife. But I was on Etsy not long after I got this knife here, and I ordered this knife because I thought, this looks like it. Look at this. Isn't this? Look at the back on this. And I believe that Navaja has the same sort of locking mechanism. I don't know. I have a couple of Spanish subs. I'm hoping they're going to tell me, or Italian. I'm not sure where it's from. This looks like it's, there's writing on the blade, but I haven't double checked it there. What was it? Los Melon. So I'm taking that's probably Spanish. But there it is. But look how small it is compared to that. But here's the bit. The blade shape's similar, but it's got the little powder horn end that this has. And I thought, that is so close. I'm going to do a review. Now, hopefully I'll get a Navaja someday and we'll do a full gross. But I'll do a review once I find out a bit more about this, and I'll do a comparison with the big Gitano, which is a beautiful knife. But I just thought that was interesting. Again, I have no idea what the age of this is, but I would say that's got to be, I don't know, is that the early 1900s again? Not sure. It's a carbon steel blade. So there, and it's a lock. This is a lock. You push this up and it breaks the lock, but you have to push it back down again to close the blade, which is lovely. So we'll get back to that. Anyway, it was on this beautiful little knife that the video was on. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Bit different, bit quirky, but sure, that's me. Take care, everybody. Paddy's gone. Cup of tea time.